Hey guys, welcome to DreamCoin, where we show you how to invest for a better tomorrow. My name's Tyler, and today we're going to be going over the company AgriForce and their recent IPO that they just had, where I think they're going to be going into the future and why I think they could be looking at huge upside based on what they are doing as a company. So what they do is insert themselves all across the production process of growing crops and yielding crops and anything that goes along with that kind of stuff in agriculture, where they look to develop not only their own intellectual property, but acquire promising new intellectual property from other businesses with the idea that they can use these to help improve the world in a sense of more efficient growing of these vegetables and medicinal different types of things that people would need for a variety of reasons. So one of their big things that makes them different from a lot of agriculture companies and stocks is that while a lot of companies will use a form of artificial intelligence, they're actually using it inside of their technology to help go with the process of managing crops and developing a system that will allow for just more efficiency in general. What they seem to have found while developing their technology is that they may have found a way to grow crops in virtually any climate. And so this provides for more accessibility on a global scale and not even just in certain areas of the world. They're going to have four main types of intellectual property that they're developing under their brand. The first being facility and lighting design, where they are looking to implement the natural sunlight that plants generally would need, but also putting it in an environment where you have the most projected to be optimal settings for humidity and air pressure and temperature for crops, so that there's no weird anomalies popping up and less disturbances that would maybe just inhibit a crop or make it so that it actually doesn't grow to its potential. They're using machine learning to figure out how to do the highest possible crop yield while having the lowest cost of doing that, whether that be use of resources or actually just monetary value for things that you would have to supply to otherwise get that yield in other settings. Fertigation and nutrients is going to be where they focus more on different ways to feed and water plants, and it's more in a controlled way so that you're not wasting as much water just kind of spraying it all over and how you would generally do that for plants. And one of the big things that drew me to them is that they are actually doing micropropagation and genetics. So they're developing tissue culture that you could essentially put in your ecosystem of crops, and this would allow for the absence of pesticides and different things that would normally be more of concern on crops in other settings, where this would keep away pests from just the natural conditions that they've developed with the tissue culture, and also mitigate some of the diseases that can affect plants, and also different things like rot and other scenarios that might pop up. Aside from their micropropagation and culture system, I feel like one of their other significant values is the fact that they have an emphasis on having as little impact on the environment as possible, which I think is a very important concern going into the next few years, especially with the emphasis shifting on a lot of governments and the public population going more towards being sustainable towards the environment and allowing for ways to just maintain our resources in more efficient ways. This is great that they're a company that is looking more towards that as a focus for their brand, because especially with agriculture and everything going forward, we are most likely going to be coming to a scenario within the next few decades where there could be food shortages in certain parts of the world and water shortages where you wouldn't have enough water possibly to water your crops and everything. So this is all stuff that would be valid concerns, where they are not only setting up systems to grow crops in potentially any environment, but they're also allowing for a way to it not be as disruptive to that environment around them. AgriForce actually IPO'd yesterday, July 8th, and the initial public offering price was about $5 per unit. They ran into pre-market where they jumped up over 200% at one point and then settled down through the day back towards their IPO price. For me right now, they're looking to be sitting around a $5 support level, especially because that's their IPO price. I think if you can get like literally $6 and under, this is going to be a great value long term, just based on the fact that they're not far off their IPO price now. They've already ran this 200% run run here, so they're severely oversold at this point, where I think they can bounce back up to the 6 area. All they would need to do to reach back to this area would be break a resistance that I'm seeing around 615, and I think that's very likely for them in the next couple of weeks. Once they break 16, they don't have much resistance here, in my opinion. I think we could see up to $7 to $8 within the next week or two, and that would be a pretty conservative estimate. That would be safe to bet on just from how they've actually had movement thus far in the first 2 trading days. As we look at some of the number data for AGRI, they're currently about 79 million in market cap at current prices, and I think this is very undervalued for what they're looking to do, especially if we scale it out for the next couple of years with the increased interest in improving the environment and figuring out how to support agriculture in general. For me, with what they're doing, I could see a pretty large upside from where they're currently sitting, especially if they can get some partnerships with some pretty big areas in the US and other parts of the world. We could be looking at where they could set themselves up for a significant market share in this space, where they could be supplying not only some of the initial process of that whole agriculture industry, but also the maintenance and harvesting process, where you just have them on every level of your production scale if you're trying to get product out to consumers or just figure out how to feed a population in a certain area. So I think a reasonable market cap for something like this would be about $600 million for me. But I do think with what they're doing, and as they expand more into the world, they could be looking towards that $1 to $2 billion area long term. That's probably going to be more out towards 2024 and 2025 for me to that extent. However, in the next year or two, I do think they can reach that $600 million area, and that would put them around $43 a share. So obviously this is pretty decent upside from here. We're looking at about an 800% increase, but with what they're doing and how they're trying to do it in a different way from how a lot of their competitors are not doing too much with cultures necessarily in the way of reducing pesticides alongside all of their other tech, I think this gives them a significant edge with all of this in their intellectual property under them as assets. I did put out a video on ARPO yesterday and why I think they'll be a decent buy going into August and September, where they put their reverse merger fully into effect, and how I think they have a decent upside. So if that's something you're interested in and you like to look at different pharma stocks and everything, I break down all the company and everything in that video for you. Other than that, that's going to do it for me in this video today, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.